The Iowa State Fair opened this morning. Montana Governor Steve Bullock stopped by to make his case to voters there. He's a latecomer to the list of Democrats seeking the 2020 nomination. He also stopped to talk with reporters after his speech.
Hello, Iowa! Look, I know you'll get dozens of people trying to make some attenuated connection to Iowa, so I'm not going to tell you that my great-great-grandparents settled in Henry County in 1850, or that my mother was born in Ottumwa, because that's not why we gather. We gather for the sake of our nation's standing in the world, and for the sake of the country we're going to pass on to that next generation. We gather to make sure that Donald Trump's a one-term president. But it's more than that. It's soundly rejecting the behavior that he's normalizing. Never in my life did I think that I would utter, you'd have a president who gives aid and comfort to our enemies abroad and incites those who fight against the decency at home. The lies, the misstatements, the dividing us by race, gender, geography. We expect more out of our preschoolers now than we do the President of the United States. And it's more than just that. It's rejecting the crony capitalism that he's creating. Whoever tears down this stage tonight will pay more in taxes than Amazon, Chevron, and 60 Fortune 500 companies. Folks expect more. It's about making Washington, D.C. work for them and getting rid of the corrupting influence of money in our elections. Look, when Lindsey Graham says we have to get this tax cut through to make our donors happy, 44% of Americans would have $400 in their pocket in case of emergency. We know something's wrong. When a generation of workers have been replaced by independent contractors, at the same time union membership is half of what it was in the 80s, we know something's wrong. When at the end of the day oil companies are making record profits and Republicans can't even acknowledge that climate change is real, we've got to change the money in our system. That's been the fight of my career, and it's the challenge of our time. This is all about making sure, no matter where you're from, who your parents were, what the color of your skin is, that everyone has a fair shot at a better future. And I say that as somebody raised in a single-parent household, paycheck to paycheck. Only knew there was a governor's house in town because I delivered newspapers to it, so I've made it 4 blocks in life. But everybody has to have a fair shot at that American dream, and that's not true right now. So we need to beat Donald Trump, but we have to make sure our economy in Washington, D.C. works for all of you. Look, but first we got to win. If we can't win back places we lost, if we can't change our strategy, if we can't give people a reason to vote for us and not just against him, Donald Trump will win again. Look, I come from a place not unlike Iowa. Know a whole lot of Trump voters. 2016, I was the only Democrat in the country to get reelected statewide in a state where Trump won. He took Montana by 20, I won by 4. 25 to 30% of my voters voted for Donald Trump. The only one in the field that won a Trump state. And you know what? The path to victory, it doesn't just go through the coasts. It goes through Iowa. It goes through Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, all places that we need to win back. And it's not just about the White House. Almost a third of your counties went Obama, Obama, Trump. We need to take back those counties as well, because it's not just about the White House, it's about the State House and what your legislature and your Republican governor is doing to you each and every day. I've only been in this race for about 10 weeks, yet it's my 8th trip to Iowa. And I've listened and I've learned from you. About that teacher that said to me, you know what, I had to take a second job just to afford my insulin. Or the farmer in Rippey that says every time Trump tweets, we lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. Or that retiree in Ottumwa after the first debate said, I heard a lot of voices, but I didn't hear my voice. I don't need a revolution. I just need someone to address the problems of here and now, the challenges that we have. So I've taken those voices as I've traveled all across the country. Look, I'm a pro-choice, pro-union, populist Democrat that won 3 elections in a red state, Not by compromising our values, but by getting stuff done. And that's how we win back the places that we lost. Showing up, listening, focusing on those challenges of everyday Americans. I do believe that government can work and government can work with you. My legislature is a little bit more Republican than yours even, about 60% Republican. But even in that time of divide, we've been able to get meaningful stuff done. Expanding health care for 100,000 Montanans, increasing mental health availability for all Montanans, kicking dark money out of our elections. Record investments in our education system, yet also recognizing fourth lowest tuition and fees by actually investing in higher ed, freezing college tuition, but also recognizing that not everybody's going to go to college. Almost 7 out of 10 Americans don't have a college degree. What are we doing for them? Fighting each day to make our two-year colleges not even about a degree, but about a professionally recognized certificate, that apprenticeship where you can climb that ladder in the middle class. As a result, more folks are climbing the ladder in the middle class than any other country or any other state in our nation. So I get stuff done by certainly trying to build relationships with those Republicans, but that doesn't mean compromising our values. I got more vetoes than any governor in the state of Montana. I vetoed every attack on a woman's right to make her own health care decisions. 25 states have actually made it harder to access the voting booth. I vetoed every attack on our ballot box and workers' rights to get actually to a courthouse as well. I've kept our public lands in public hands. I've preserved our environment along the way as well. And every single attack on workers to roll back the effort to organize and collectively bargain, I've stopped. That's both how you can govern and how you can win. And we can win this. We can win this, but we can't make it all about Donald Trump. We can't make it just about plans that are written for press releases or offering everybody everything free when what really people want is a fair shot in this economy. We can, if we don't spend the next year and a half, we can win this by as long as we're not chasing every one of Trump's tweets. We can make health care accessible and affordable for all, but we don't have to disrupt 165 million people on private insurance. We can have a public option, finally negotiate drug prices, take those steps, ending surprise medical bills. 70 times Republicans have tried to repeal and replace Obamacare. We don't need the Democrats to do that to actually make a difference. We can make college affordable and the debt more accessible, freezing those interest rates, taking those steps, cracking down on the fly-by-nights like the Trump universities, making sure increasing availability for Pell Grants. But we don't have to forget about 68% of Americans that don't have even that college degree, providing them that path to the better life as well. We can address climate change. Fire seasons are 78 days longer in Montana than they were 40 years ago. And remember George H.W. Bush? That first one, he actually said, we'll address the greenhouse effect with the White House effect. Republicans won't even acknowledge that climate change is real anymore. We can, as we take care of dark money, but we can also rejoin Paris, invest in renewables, do what the original conservationists, our farmers, are doing, is investing in the opportunities to get to the point where we are carbon neutral. And as we do that, we don't have to leave communities behind. We can finally break that dark money stranglehold of the NRA and address gun safety for all Americans, because nobody should be afraid to go to their school or an outing like this. We can do all that and more. Look, this is the most important election, certainly in my lifetime. It's about beating Donald Trump. But it's also about preserving this 243-year experiment called representative democracy. It's about not accepting what's been normalized. It's about the kid who's growing up right now that says, I can do better than my parents, at a time where only about half of Americans are doing better than their parents were at their age. It's about recognizing 60% of Americans haven't had a pay increase in 40 years in real terms. And they deserve every opportunity that a Koch brother or a millionaire has. It's about winning back places we lost, giving people a reason to know that we will fight for their everyday lives, making it better, because if somebody's voting their economic interests, their health care interests, their education interests, they'd sure as hell be voting for Democrats. But first, we got to win. It's a false distinction. Do we take out places like make sure that we run up the numbers in California, or do we make sure that we win Iowa? I will guarantee you, if you make me the nominee, I will win California, Massachusetts, Vermont. I don't know if those senators could make the same guarantee that they could win Montana, Iowa, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, places that we have to win in order to get there and beat Donald Trump. You know, I've learned my time in Iowa, not just because of my great-great-grandparents who settled in Henry County, or my grandparents who went to college here, or my mom who was born in Ottumwa. I have learned about Iowa nice. We are 178 days from you all taking a big field, kind of throwing in Harry Potter's sorting hat and narrowing it down. And I know that you all take this responsibility very, very seriously. And Iowa nice says, Georgia Governor, you're somewhere on my list. Like, well, is that on your list of 37? Or is it the top 3? I want to earn your support. That's what I like to hear. I want to earn your support because, look, I have a 17-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 12-year-old. Yeah, this election's about beating Donald Trump. But it's also about making sure what we hand off to that next generation is better than what we had. This is a tenuous time. This is a very tenuous time in this thing called representative democracy. We can do better. Thanks so much for having me. Thanks so much for being out. I'd be willing to answer almost any question. Thanks. Sure. So the question was, so you referenced preschool earlier, and preschool is so important. What would you do to actually ensure access to preschool? And quality preschool, not just preschool. Like, let's recognize, right? 90% of a child's brains develop before they even enter kindergarten. If you're not kindergarten ready, half as likely to be at grade level by third grade. You're not at grade level by third grade, 4 times more likely to drop out of high school. Quality preschool program costs more than college tuition in most states right now. The fate of your future shouldn't be defined by the lottery of life of what family you're born into. When we talk about overall investing in education, I think the most important thing actually that we can do, look, our teachers don't get paid enough. You look at places like this that are actually cutting back investments into higher education, but making sure that quality preschool is universal for all. And that's where the federal government can actually step in. It's the smartest investment we can make because for every $1 that we put in, it's about a $9 return. Thanks so much for fighting for it.
May I have your attention, please? Will Wendy Olson.
The question was, what famous historical figure who was not a president, like, who's my favorite? Question was, what famous historical person that was not a president is my favorite? Can I say my great-great-grandfather who settled in Henry County? Because they had a store in Lowell through both world wars. I mean, not a well-known political figure. I'll throw out a woman named Jeannette Rankin. So Jeannette Rankin was actually the first woman ever to get elected to Congress. And she came from the great state of Montana. And it was in the early 1900s. She's one that actually is one of my favorites. Another one that, Montana, I talk about kicking dark money out of our elections. That really has been the fight of my career. One point, every single office was controlled by these wealthy copper barons. Called them copper kings. Mark Twain talked about it. He said, in Montana, even by their example, corruption smells sweet in Montana. A newspaper in 1903 said the greatest living issue confronting us today is whether the corporation shall control the people or the people shall control the corporations. Fast forward 100 years, and that's exactly what's happened. But the greatest living that never got names were regular folks that passed this thing called the Corrupt Practices Act of 1912 that said, you know what? We're all equal on one day, and that's Election Day. And our voice is stronger than any damn corporation. And they kick the corporations out of our elections till Citizens United in Montana. We need to do it all across this country if we're ever going to get this democracy back. Yes, ma'am. So the question was, how do you address the shortage of both mental health professionals and lack of mental health access especially in our rural areas of our states? And it's something that you and I struggle with each and every day, something that I in Montana have struggled with as governor. Like, I knew when I actually got Medicaid expanded in a ruby red state at the time, 2015, the heart of the anti-Obamacare time, I knew that I'd not only save those rural hospitals, but provide opportunities. For the 100,000 folks that get their health care, the vast majority of them who are working through Medicaid, 30,000 of them have gotten mental health treatment availability as well. We started, and this is in Montana, then we'll take it a little bit bigger. We started actually a program to address anybody that goes, usually folks see their primary care doctor. So we actually go through screenings from mental health perspective and see if there's suicidal ideations. Because at the end of the day, that's usually within 40 days of committing suicide. So algorithms, that if things come up, they actually will be connected with licensed psychologists. We've done more of the telemedicine, and then we've also made it so that, passed a law through that legislature that mental health parity and physical health parity in insurance has to be the same. And I think as a president, that you need to lead and you need to take both federal dollars and investing in the challenges, especially of rural areas. Because if we don't have quality access to mental health care, I as a Commander-in-Chief of the National Guard, I've lost 9 soldiers in 6 years, all to suicide. If we don't have access in our rural areas as well, you can't live in those communities. Sir. Question was, Republicans always talk about the deficit till they actually get elected. Then they do a $1.6 trillion, not tax cut, but tax loan, right? Because that next generation is going to pay for the Trump tax debts. Democrats talk about a lot of these social programs, but what are you going to do about that, right? And, I think there is a different perspective coming from Washington, D.C. and from out of Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. has not passed a budget in 22 years on time. If I didn't do that once, I'd be kicked out of office. And I actually have to balance my budget each and every time. So when I look at what we can do and how we can invest and what we need to do to make sure that our kids and grandkids aren't actually saddled with all of the debt, I take a little bit different perspective. That's why I say when we talk about things like wish list economics, if I'm going to talk about a plan, I'm going to fund it. If I'm going to talk about one of the things, like, I think my plan on health care is much better, and it won't cost $30 trillion over the next decade. We have to be responsible stewards, and every time we talk about here's something new, we also have to talk about how we're going to fund it. I'll close because I have just like 47 seconds left. When I got elected governor, my kids were 6, 8, and 10. It was the youngest in 40 years that had to live in the Montana governor's residence. And I'll never forget, we move in, my 6-year-old son kicks a soccer ball, bounces off this painting. Somebody says, you know, that painting is worth about $200,000. I'm like, then get rid of all the damn paintings, right? We have to live here. But we're in a deeply divided time, 2/3 Republican legislature at the time. And during my first day of the state, I started out by saying, my name's Steve, I work for the state. But I also said, the ages of kids, 6, 8, and 10, you're going to be hearing different noises from the governor's house. And I think we as elected leaders need to learn that our kids learn from our words and our deeds, what we say and what we do, and our kids are watching today. We need to make sure we give something for them to aspire to and be inspired by. At some point, this president's going to have to answer that. At some point, each and every one of us are going to have to answer this. We can build that better union with actually bringing people together, not tearing this country apart. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. Go to stevebullock.com to sign up. Thanks for your Iowa Nice. It'll take me from 35 to #1 on your list. Absolutely. I mean, look, as a gun owner myself, as someone who's had to lower the flags 9 times since the Vegas shooting, as someone who has a child who is first week of school, had to learn where to go in case of an active shooter, gun owners want to make sure that families are kept safe, and the majority of gun owners actually believe in universal background checks, the red flag laws, the removing guns where there's an order of protection, fixing the NICS system. If we could ever get the NRA out of this, because what they do, when I was growing up, it was a hunting, gun safety organization. Now it's nothing more than a political organization drive us apart. But if gun owners finally stand up, and the vast majority of Republican gun owners even think we should have universal background checks, I think we can make progress on this. Do I give you guys 2 questions first?
Governor, how do you catch enough attention to build the campaign to where you'll be on that 3rd debate stage?
Well, and then, yeah, first, if everybody goes to stevebullock.com, that will help. You know, look, I got in supposedly late only 10 weeks ago because I had a job to do. My legislature was still meeting, and I had to get health care reauthorized for 100,000 Montanans. It comes to chasing 100,000 donors or getting health care for 100,000 Montanans, it's the easiest decision I'd ever make. But what I'll continue to do along the way is get out, talk to folks in Iowa and across the country. I'm the only one in this field that actually won in Trump's state. We have to win back places we lost. I'm the only one that's been able to demonstrate, even a divided government, you can get meaningful, progressive things done. And I think I offer something that can not only bring Democrats together, but win this election.
Do you think that the donor requirement has perverted how candidates behave at this?
Oh, I do. So I don't think, look, elections are about talking, and candidly, not even necessarily to all of you. Elections are about talking to people. And when right now, some campaigns, you're spending $80 online to get a $1 donor, that's not what these elections are about. So I don't think that that was the best policy. It's what I got to live with. But I also recognize that every other time, it really is these early states that take a big field and bring them down. I'm counting on Iowans.
What would you do? Trade is a huge issue here. What would you do on differently on trade, and specifically with China?
Trade's a big issue here. It's a big issue all across the country. I mean, when farmers here are planting soybeans and losing money for every single acre that they plant, or when they say to me, not me telling them, you know, a payment from the federal government isn't going to get us that market share back that we lost. I think Donald Trump's taken this thing of America first and made it America alone. And at the same time that he's jacking up tariffs that hit our farmers, but will actually hit every American, China's lowering its tariffs for the rest of the world. We got to be tough on China, but we can't do it alone. So what I would do is bring in the global community and say, look, our biggest fight right now is on tech. So let's fight about tech and make sure that China can't steal our tech, but let's make sure that we also keep open markets. When that farmer in Rippey literally said to me, every time he tweets, we lose hundreds of thousands of dollars, it tells you something that this president isn't representing their needs.
he's representing himself.
Governor Bullock, you said that with every day that passes, it's more likely that Trump will get reelected. Is there something that's specifically problematic with the other Democratic candidates that you're sharing with me right now?
Well, no, I do have concerns. What I talk about is like people's everyday challenges in their lives aren't being addressed. They don't want to listen to food fight of what happened 40 years ago. They don't want to have empty promises and plans. I mean, and I did say in that speech as an example, right? It took us years and years to get to where we are with Obamacare, which was the biggest step in healthcare since Medicare and Medicaid. And it used to be Republicans talking about repealing and replacing it. Now it's Democrats saying that we have to start from square one. I don't think 165 million folks, they want affordable and accessible health insurance, but they don't want that taken away from them. I want to make sure when we talk about, look, the biggest problem in immigration right now is Donald Trump. He is ripping our country apart, and he's ripping families apart. But we don't have to chase everything that he does. Yeah, we should have. And I've met folks here in Iowa. Yeah, we should protect dreamers. Yes, we should have a path to citizenship. Yes, we should have secure borders, but not by building a wall. But you don't have to say things like, because of what Donald Trump's done, repealing a 90-year-old law that makes it illegal or legal to make an unlawful entry into this country, or providing health care for everyone undocumented. If we have 100,000 people showing up at the border right now, we did have multiples of that. And that's not my statement, that's actually Obama's former Homeland Security person. So let's talk about things that'll impact people's lives each and every day. Let's not have this as just an academic discussion.
Governor, on the topic
what's your reaction to the more than 600 undocumented immigrants that ICE raided yesterday?
So I haven't seen, look, it is problematic if what ICE is doing is that ICE used to always certainly be going after, those who have committed significant crimes. But again, I don't want to spend the next year and a half reacting to Donald Trump, and I don't think most of America does. What they want to know is that we could have a sane and thoughtful immigration system. And when this president, as an example on Monday, said, we got to speak with one voice when it comes to racism, bigotry, and white supremacy. He says that on a Monday. He doesn't act like that for the last 2.5 years, and he can't even make it a day between El Paso and Dayton without continuing to divide people. I think that we should expect more.
On Trump's tweets, I wanted to know, on these 4 congresswomen that he attacked a few weeks ago, do you think it could help Democrats, including some of your colleagues who are running for president, by embracing them or energizing them, or do you think that it will sway off a lot of voters?
Well, I think, look, those were horrible statements. He is using race to divide us. We should stand up. We should condemn it, but recognize at the same time that all of the media and everybody else spent 2.5 weeks talking about these tweets. His Justice Department was in federal court trying to rip away coverage for pre-existing conditions for everybody in this country. Betsy DeVos was trying to privatize public education. He appointed somebody to the Bureau of Land Management that wants to privatize public lands. So let's make sure that we don't make the same mistake of 2016, both as candidates and as the media, condemn what he does, but also look at all the other things that are being done that aren't improving people's lives.
Governor, Elizabeth Warren has come out and said that Donald Trump is a white supremacist. Would you go as far to call the president that?
I would say that there are certainly white supremacists that think Donald Trump has their back. And I would say that he does continue to use race, gender, and geography to divide our country. I'd say that the language and being equivocating with what happened in Richmond, Virginia, that's not how we should have leaders act.
How important is it to make the 3rd debate stage for you? And do you think there's a viable strategy, if you do not, to focus on states like Iowa?
Well, once you have all your folks go to stevebullock.com, it'll be easy. No, I do think that there is a viable strategy. Look, I hope to be on that debate stage, but we're still also 6 months out. And I do think Iowans take this very, very seriously. I mean, in my 8 trips here, that's the one thing that has been imprinted on my brain, and they should, because it's a solemn responsibility that they get to have. And at the end of the day, this big field won't be winnowed down by a debate stage soon. It'll actually be ultimately winnowed down by the voters of Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada.
Wait from qualifying for the next debate session. How do you plan to get there? 103,000 donors.
No, I'll do everything I can to get there, but that doesn't mean I'm just going to be running around raising money to try to spend more money online. I mean, I'm good.
Do you support mandatory gun buybacks?
I don't.
Why not?
I think that that we should have voluntary buybacks, and I think that there are ways. Let's look at this as a public health issue, but I don't support a mandatory buyback.
Governor, you talked about Iowa, New Hampshire winnowing the field with these debate goals. The DNC trying to take that role away from Iowa, New Hampshire?
Well, you'd have to talk to the DNC about that. When I talk to Iowans, they take this very, very seriously, and that's where I'm going to be. Look, I didn't write the rules.
Governor, the shooter in El Paso, in his manifesto, wrote that he used hollow points specifically for the maximum damage. Do you support a ban on hollow point bullets?
So I didn't see what the shooter said. I think we do need to look at this as a public health issue, and if that helps, I would give that consideration. I do think that, as a hunter, I've never met a hunter who says he needs a magazine of 30 clips. I've never seen that he needs a bump stock. Never seen a hunter say that it's okay for somebody who, you get banned from being on an airplane for a no-fly list, but you can still buy a gun.
Governor, on Medicare, you said that Barack Obama said 2008 you're starting to scratch single payer was the best healthcare system. He said 2018 Medicare for all was a good new idea. Is he wrong when you say, because you're saying that Medicare for all?
No. There's a bunch of great ideas, and I have no problem with that conversation with great ideas. And I think that the gains that we made, like if you look at even when we talk about Medicare, it took a long time to cover folks with disabilities under 65. It took a long time to cover prescription drug benefits. It wasn't until the ACA where we closed the donut hole for prescription drug prices. So I don't think that, it won't take another 65 years to get to where we were today. But I think that the best way to go about it isn't to disrupt what would be 180 million people. I think we can make healthcare affordable and accessible in other ways.
Last question. What's your favorite fair food?
So my favorite fair food, I just got here. I so hope when my family arrives that you're not all with me and I'm going to eat everything fried and some pork belly on a stick. Thanks so much for being with me today, for sure. What's your favorite?
A booth at the Iowa State Fair had fairgoers vote for their favorite presidential candidate for 2020 by adding a corn kernel into a jar. President Trump led the Republicans. On the Democratic side, it was Joe Biden with an estimated 36% of the corn kernels. The former vice president was at the fair today and ran into Governor Bullock at the corn vote booth. Former Vice President Biden then moved on to make his case to voters.